Cradle, Dogs of Fount, Chapter 10. They spread through the expansive forest like racing pros. Although the black off-road motorcycles had collision sensors that would correct a distracted or bad driver's mistakes, Nate and Heather never had to rely on them. Naturally, Nate was a better rider for the fact that back in Fount, he had a bike that was mostly just an engine attached to wheels and no more technology than that. Heather had more time in the heat and had relied heavily on tech. It was the beginning of dusk and the sun was lighting its gold way through the thick of trees. Nate rarely felt so free as he did when riding a bike in the summer. He didn't wear his tactical helmet for the very same reason, although Heather seemed to like being informed, so while her wheels were rolled, she wore the matte black head cage. Nate had almost forgot about the big fuss that Heather threw when they were packing and setting off. Nate honestly could only take one bike for the both of them, but Heather vehemently contested their arrangement. The whole camp hangar was staring at Nate, Heather, and poor old Gus. Gus was an older warrior with a huge belly. No one called him Gut, but everyone was sure they all thought it all the same. In the end, Hobbs pulled some strings and got Heather her own bike. Nate rarely used the word in its usual context, but she was being in his opinion. Lately, it seemed to Nate that he was always in need of one thing or the other, and that things were always elusive until he got them, in which case it didn't matter anymore. At the moment, it was the damn helmet. He hated wearing it, but wearing it also meant that he could chat with Heather. Even so, there was a chance she would only speak to him sparingly and dry. He had never known another girl like her. He knew she had a soft side, but she could be harder than some men that Nate knew. It wasn't even about being tough for Nate. It was how she never let anyone else, man or woman, control her in any way. She was a warrior, but warriors served by choice. In the Heap, or Philadelphia, it was a great honor to be a warrior, but at any time and for any reason, a warrior could walk away with no questions asked. On one hand, Fount blamed technology, and on the other, the Heat blamed authoritarianism. In about 5 minutes on this spotty dirt trail, they would reach the camp, and there they would have to leave their bikes. The rest of the way to Fount would have to be on foot. There was no use in trying to break her down tonight, Nate thought. He guessed that she had been planning in her mind the whole ride how to ice him out. It was one of her gifts. The fire and the darkness mixed around the campfire and brought Nate and Heather a romantic autumn atmosphere in the midst of a summer night. Nate sat near a rock the size of a bowling ball and lit a cigarette. He ran his fingers through his hair, sighed, looked at the cigarette with non-aware intensity and flicked it into the fire. Heather was shifting around in her tent. Nate could hear her, and he wondered what she was doing. "Want me to cook dinner?" Nate hollered. "What? You aren't already?" Nate shook his head and went to his backpack to fetch a meal pack. It came wrapped in metallic plastic and was about twice the size of a box of quick mac and cheese. "It's ready," Nate called to the tent. He'd already set her a bowl of chicken and dumplings with a wedge of cornbread on a small foldable table. She came out in gray sweatpants and a darker gray tee. Nate sat across the fire from her and picked up his bowl. He wasn't hungry, but he learned after being a soldier for almost 3 years that food could be the difference between outrunning death and being overcome by it. Nate thought he felt Heather's eyes on him, but when he looked up, she was looking into her bowl of soup. But she did look up at him as he was taking her in. "What's the first place you want to see when we get there?" she asked. Nate smiled with lines around the corners of his mouth and said, "I want to see my parents' house. I know they're probably worried sick about me, but if I could just see their house, it'll be just fine." Heather grabbed her shiny black ponytail and looked at the starry sky at an angle. "It's been so long for me. I used to hate Fount. Well, I guess I still do in some way, but I miss my friends and family. I miss going to the park and forgetting about how poor I was. I miss the feeling of a book in my hands. She shifted her eyes to Nate's and smirked. Look at us getting all sentimental. We could be the ones to bring an end to it all. That's not up to us, Nate replied. If they want to fall rather than change, he shrugged. They ate in silence for about 5 minutes. Heather finished her bowl and threw it in the fire. They were made of recycled paper. She walked to her tent and crouched to fit through the opening and stopped. I don't hate you, Nate. He had already been looking at her and he nodded. I know. We aren't normal people, and I forget that at times, she said and disappeared into her tent. Nate woke just after sunrise and felt he should have felt better in the golden light in the forest morning. It was just that something was missing. He took out his red and white pack of Chief Montana cigarettes and looked at it while seriously considering getting the shot so he could quit. There were footsteps in the leaves behind him. He put the cigarettes back in his jeans pockets and went to the collapsible locker to get breakfast ready. I'm not hungry. You? She asked. Nate grunted and shrugged. Actually, I am. I'll cook you some just in case you change your mind. Nate looked at her in the morning light. Her hair almost looked dark brown and her eyes lit up green. She was in civvy clothes, as Nate was, too. Her jeans were very tight and she had spaghetti string shoulder straps for her black tank top. The desire was obvious in his eyes. That what you wearing? Jeans and a white shirt? She asked. Nate looked down his front and frowned. Yeah, why? Heather shrugged and went back to her tent. Hurry up and eat. If we leave in 15 minutes, we'll make it to Fount around 5:30. What? Are we jogging or something? He asked. We'll never make it that soon by walking. He stared at her tent, waiting for a response. Then he heard her brushing her teeth. He took out a cigarette and put it in the corner of his mouth, ready to light the fresh end. He took it from his mouth and threw it back in the pack. He didn't want the smoke to spoil his taste for breakfast. They both wore their warrior spec rain jackets as the thunder shower poured over them. The entire forest floor turned into a muddy mess. Both of their calf-high brown boots were caked with a batter of thick mud, twigs, pine needles, and gravel. At this moment, the sun was shining through the clouds more towards Fount's direction, but where the two warriors made their way, the rain was still driving. This is great, isn't it? Nate complained. That's what the forecast is for. Nate had had enough. The adrenaline was coursing through his veins with electricity, and if he would have acknowledged it, tears were on deck if he lost control. What exactly is your problem with me? You cheat on me. You stop talking to me. You treat me like dirt and always have something smart to say. Nate couldn't see her eyes for her olive hood. It didn't make him feel any less exposed. Then the rain stopped. Nate almost flinched at the sudden stop. Heather pulled back her hood. Her face was completely emotionless. They stared at each other for a half a minute. You just need a cigarette, she said. Nate turned to go on walking toward Fount. He walked 10 steps and looked behind him. Heather hadn't followed. Come on, I don't have time for this crap. Nate yelled to be sure she heard every word. Still, she was stationary with her hands on her hips. Nate trotted back to her and looked her straight in the eyes. She held his gaze for a few moments then looked away. She spat off to her side and continued looking at the flank. What kind of game is this? Nate asked. Then it dawned on him. The rain started pouring again, but neither of them put their hoods on again. He knew he had to do something or his life would change more than likely for the worst. Her eyeliner gave her black tears, and Nate could smell his hair gel as it ran down his face with the rain. He turned his back to her, ready to walk away. I love you, Nate said. He heard footsteps and then she passed him on her way to Fount. He followed a couple paces behind. The sun made the water warm on his face.